Friends, the motivation behind this small presentation on what is sociology and what is not is to clarify the difference between sociological type of research and other researches. All kinds of researches done on society or human behavior or social behavior cannot be called sociological. Sociology is a distinct subject, a discipline with its distinct methodology and a distinct approach and its own theories. Recently, I saw a paper which had come to me for review from an Indian journal, and it was uh, on usage of social media by students of a PG college. As such, the paper had everything that papers usually have: a short introduction, objectives, hypothesis, methodology, sample design. In the findings part, data on how much is social media used by students and their perception on whether it is good or bad, whether it interferes in their education or it promotes their development in their field of education, were given. But at the end of it, I was wondering whether the paper can really be called a sociological paper, because it was simply a documentation of the status of use of software. It had nothing to say about a theory of application or usage of social media, and it did not relate usage of social media to anything like urban, rural, male, female, gender, or caste, class, or ethnicity, or occupation groups, or parental background, or the type of college or the type of education they are getting in the college. So, and this is not a unique thing. This was not something which happened to me first time. Quite often, I get papers for review and PhD thesis for examination, in which a lot of data are given on a particular topic, but without relating it to other aspects of society. Simple documentation of a phenomenon is, in my opinion, not sociology. So, this short presentation, I share my screen, and the title of the presentation is What Sociology is Not. Quite often, in the name of sociology, PhD students and young researchers are doing what cannot properly be called sociology. Friends, the strategy that I will follow is that I will tell what sociology is not, give some examples, and then at the end suggest how will sociologists approach if they have to study the same topics. So friends, first of all, sociology is not a mere description of a unique or isolated event or process or place or phenomenon or a fact-finding report. Sociology is not a fact-finding report. Examples of such things which I see sometimes in the name of sociology are as follows. Extent of application of social media in a PG College of Bihar. This was the paper I was referring to. Nutrition status of women in Arunachal Pradesh, or it may be in any other state. Just documenting from one particular national level or large scale data source what is the nutrition status of women. Unless you compare this with nutrition status of men, or unless you correlate nutrition status of women with their background, it cannot become sociological, because sociology, as some of the early sociologists said, follows a comparative method. Or oath-taking ceremony of MPs, or inauguration of a new mall in Mumbai, the ceremony part, or even describing how does that mall look like, what kind of people go there. This is not sociology. Description of sociology department of a central university or a degree college in Ayodhya, some district, of some state, is not sociology. Then what is sociology? Sociology is a comparative study of usage of social media. Means what that student or what that researcher should have done. He could have compared usage of social media with parental background, type of education that they are seeking, or with uh, gender or caste or class, or urban rural variations in background. Unless you relate your phenomenon to something else in society, the social structure, the normative structure, or other similar phenomena in society, your research does not become sociological. So, nutrition status becomes a sociological issue when you find or you explore differences in rural and urban communities, or males and females, or according to education categories, or caste or community. Generally, we do it, we classify caste according to general, OBC, SC, ST, and sometimes minorities. So unless we compare nutrition status according to these variables, your study is not going to be sociological in nature. It doesn't interest sociologists. Sociology is not historical trend in the incidence or prevalence of a chosen phenomenon. For example, if you give me data on sex ratio in India, that in according to 2021 census, the sex ratio of India is this. It makes no sociological sense. If you tell me that life expectancy of India is around 68 years today, it makes no sense at all. But if you say that India's life expectancy is 68, while in some of the developed countries it has reached 88, or you say that there are still many countries where life expectancy is in 40s, then it makes sense. And then I would like to know what kind of countries in which life expectancy has crossed 80 are, and what kind of countries are those where life expectancy is still 40s. Maybe some interesting hypothesis regarding relationship between development and life expectancy will emerge from there. Or data on domestic violence, likewise, as regarding sex ratio, or regarding life expectancy. Data on domestic violence in India, no matter how elaborate they are, you may divide them according to emotional, sexual, and physical violence, or whatever, are not sociology. Similarly, rise and fall in deaths due to infectious diseases, or uh, famines, or floods, or droughts, will not make the study sociological. Or study of changing growth rate of the world population, very important issue for demographers. It's a very important issue, what is happening to world population, what is the history of world population. But history of world population growth is not sociology. This is what I want to say. And I want to say this, I want to emphasize this to our PhD students and students of BA and MA, and young scholars who are still uh, confused about the nature of sociology. The study of relationship between caste, community, and sex ratio is part of sociology. Same is the case with political economy of droughts as of the Bengal famine in 1943. Friends, sociology is not the relationship between two or more purely economic or purely psychological or purely political factors. I will give you examples of purely psychological or purely political factors. For example, in economics, there are very popular studies regarding head count ratio, relationship between head count ratio of poverty. This is one of the measures of poverty, what percentage of population is living below the poverty line, and growth rate of income. Studying this relationship will be of immense use to economists, but this is not sociological. Similarly, perceived severity of cancer or any other disease and anxiety among the caregivers. There are two variables. One, severity of cancer, perceived severity of cancer, and another variable is anxiety. The relationship between them would be of interest to psychologists, but it is not of interest to sociologists as such. Similarly, industrialization and energy consumption. Lot of researches have been done on this. What is the relationship between industrialization and energy consumption per capita? But it doesn't interest sociologists as such. Similarly, in political science, you have republicanism and communitarianism. Yes, very important issues. Recently, to a pre-PhD batch of political science, I gave somewhere lectures on republicanism and communitarianism. They are very important concepts and very important for us also to examine. But this is not sociology. The study of relationship between social structure on the one hand and economic development on the other is, however, part of sociology. Also, a study of education and anxiety, education level of caregivers and their anxiety. This will become social psychological, and this can also be placed in the category of sociological research. I do not make much difference between social psychological and sociological. To me, it's okay. The point is that these variables, growth rate of income or poverty or cancer, perceptions of severity of cancer or anxiety among the caregivers or industrialization or energy consumption or republicanism and communitarianism, they have to be related to some other aspect of society. It may be development, it may be modernization, it may be culture, it may be change of culture or change of values, or it may be social structure or the normative structure. Sum total of all the expected roles and relationships existing in society. Similarly, studying one single aspect of life of a group or a community would not make it a sociological study. For example, you may study religious rituals of the Taru Janjati in UP. You can do a good study of it. Or you can study major religious festivals among Parsis. You can study Sweden cultivation in Odisha. You can study leisure time activities among the IT workers in general. Yes, very important study. And certainly they have policy implications also. Somebody somewhere will benefit from conducting such studies. But to me, they are not sociological studies. Though a study of changing religious beliefs in response to neoliberal economy is part of sociology. We did a study of Bondo tribes regarding uh, perceptions of health or health beliefs, because Bondo tribe is no more monolithic kind of group. There are Bondos in Odisha, they live in Odisha. There are some Bondos who are still living in a primitive kind of state. There are others who have modernized, developed, and they are living amidst the general population, non-tribal population, and progressing with them. They are acquiring education, they are acquiring modern values, and they cannot be called really the primitive or indigenous kind of tribe. and there are in between, some in between. Sometimes height, uh, and most of them live on hills. Sometimes the height at which they live also shows the level of development and modernization. So you can compare those um, upper bondos and middle level or lower bondos. That will be an interesting study. That will be sociological. Study of the link between industrialization and rationalization is part of sociology. This is industrialization and rationalization. Industrialization is an economic variable. Rationalization as a process is social, and Max Weber explored the relationship between them. Study of development and health beliefs among the indigenous communities, I gave you the example of bondos, will certainly make a good sociological study. Friends, that is why I often ask, when I see theses or papers coming to me for review, uh, there is no dearth of numbers, frequencies, proportions, rates, and ratios. Qualitative studies or analysis of narratives, studies using the really qualitative methodology are still rare in mainstream sociology. What we see that the students or the research scholars, they do their quantitative study, talk about sample design, analyze their data statistically. But simple incidence, prevalence, frequencies, proportions, rates, and ratios are not sociology. Simple presentation of averages, means, and standard deviations is not sociology. A comparative study of them is. So when you compare something by gender, class, ethnicity, in our case, in Indian case, caste, or culture, the value system is part of sociology. Sociology demands exploring, therefore, because sociology studies relationships. It follows comparative methodology. You see, to support what I'm saying, I can say that the famous, one of the earliest sociologists, one of the founding fathers of sociology, Durkheim, he did not present data on suicide rates for a particular country. He calculated ratios of that rate, ratios of ratios, and ratios of ratios to compare suicide rate between cultures, um, according to season, according to religious beliefs, according to education, according to occupation, and males and females. And that made uh, the foundation of sociology is strong. We study social facts or patterns or regularities in relation to each other, not in isolation. So, and when you do so, and you use quantitative methods, you use survey method, you use experimental method, or even if you use observation methods, or do content analysis in using qualitative methodology, you have to go for chi-squares, t-tests, f-tests, confidence interval, etc. Because sociology studies society, it's a relationship with social behavior and norms focused on one activity. We call it institution. What are institutions? Institutions are social norms, guidelines focused on one specific activity, like economic activity, religious activity, education, and so on. So when you link the two institutions, then it becomes sociological. Or when you link changing nature of institutions of society with overall developments in society, then also it makes a sense to a sociologist. And when you do so, you also find that in literature, what you are trying to do, there is a lot of theoretical material on that, which can be called sociological. So not only studies of comparisons, ratios of ratios, as Durkheim did, or linking various institutions or institutions with larger society, or studying social change in a holistic manner. Uh, that is sociology. And for that, you need to do some bivariate analysis. I do not know uh, whether in absence of bivariate analysis or multivariate analysis, I can really call a study sociological. So it's good to study something like nutrition, but unless, in a good sociological study of nutrition, you will have a dependent variable, some indicator of nutrition status. Uh, there are so many indicators, so you will choose one, and then you will take independent variables. Independent variables will be socioeconomic variables, policy variables, and then you will use something like logistic regression or Poisson regression or something, so that you can make statements about whether malnutrition depends on a particular factor or not. Unless you can show, unless you can demonstrate the relationships, you are not doing a good sociological study. Thank you. So friends, uh, uh, as, as I go through, recently I saw a PhD thesis from a university, Central University, in which a lot of data were presented on various aspects of migration. It's okay to say that migrants are satisfied at the native place or not, or they are satisfied at the place of destination or not. What is the educational background of the migrants, etc., etc. Okay, or in what kind of activities are migrants indulge? Whether they feel that their newfound home uh, is good, uh, whether the new city or new town or new village in which they are living makes them happy, or they feel whether their decision to migrate from their place of origin to this place was okay. It's interesting to study all these things. But unless you relate these things with cultural or structural variables, your study does not become a sociological study. I thought that in this small presentation, I can make that distinction clear, and I can tell students, those who are listening to me, that unless you make a comparison, read something of Durkheim. He did not simply present rates of suicide. He made ratios of ratios. All great. Karl Marx, although he did not use the survey method, but he made an interesting point that our ideas, values, education, morality, our thinking on economic issues and all that depends or is closely linked with the relations of production. It was this linkage because of which I can say that Karl Marx was a sociologist. No, Karl Marx gave figures of infant mortality, but not merely figures of infant mortality. He also showed differences in infant mortality between workers and others. So this makes his study sociological. I think in the future, if you are a student of sociology and you are planning to write your thesis or you are planning to write a research paper, you will keep this point in mind that unless you relate your study variable, whatever it may be migration, it may be family, it may be religion, religious beliefs, it may be nutrition, it may be comprehensive knowledge of HIV, it may be any variable. It may be interest in sports, your likings and dislikings, political variables, your understanding of communitarianism, or anything. This has to be related to culture and social structure of society. Only when you do so, you can uh, claim that yes, you have learned the tricks and the science of sociology. If you have not learned this, then simply documenting facts about one social phenomenon will not qualify you to be called a sociologist. Thank you, friends. Thank you.